I would have won the whole show. Yeah. Pretty bad. Number one. Big facts. I would have won the whole show. Yeah.
All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. The topic of today's video: could Nick Walker have won the Arnold Classic had he competed this weekend and defended his title from last year? So this is a very interesting one. I've seen a lot of people speculate about this. You guys saw the intro to this video. Nick Walker thinks the same thing. He thinks that he could have won this weekend. And this is no disrespect to anybody that competed this weekend. This is purely speculation. And obviously, it's a little bit of a justified speculation because Nick has said, it wasn't his choice not to do the Arnold Classic. He wanted to. And technically, because he didn't defend his Arnold Classic title here, he never truly lost it because he wasn't beaten in an Arnold lineup. Now, the other interesting thing here, and these pictures that you're looking at are edited by the Super Set Man, who I think did a pretty good job of finding comparable photos of Nick from last year's Arnold and scaling them appropriately to fit in with the top two here, William Bonac and Brandon Curry, which I think is a very fair and very interesting comparison because if you look at the fact that at the last show where Nick competed against Brandon and Bonac, things were very different. He competed against them at the Olympia, and at the Olympia, he placed ahead of Bonac and placed behind Brandon Curry. But the reason why that's so interesting is because this time around at the Arnold, William Bonac was much better at the Arnold than he was at the Olympia, and Brandon Curry, I would say, was worse than he was at the Olympia. Again, not a knock on Brandon, it's just how I view it. So on one hand, you can look back and say Curry just beat Nick Walker, so he would beat him again. But on the other hand, you could look back and say Nick just beat Bonac, so he would beat him again. And I don't know if either of those are necessarily true. William Bonac looked fantastic at this show. Like I said, way better than he looked at the Olympia, and I think it would have been a much tighter competition between him and Nick this time around, considering how much better Bonac did look at this show. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these photos here. Now, I believe they've got all of the mandatory poses with Nick edited in, so that's why I wanted to include this post from the Super Set Man. So we're going to kind of talk about some different factors, whether or not Nick could have won some of these poses. I think conditioning is a big one that a lot of people are talking about here. I would say it's fair to say that Brandon was a bit off here compared to how he looked at the Olympia, and I think it's fair to say that Bonac was on here, almost pretty much 100%. I think Bonac looked really good. His conditioning was great. So starting things off, looking at this most muscular pose, I think it's fair to say that the competition for most muscular would be more between Nick and Bonac. Because Bonac, if you guys, I don't know if you guys saw this part of the finals, but Bonac actually won the, I think it was $10,000 award for the most muscular bodybuilder, and Brandon did not. And I think Nick might have won it last year, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Nick would take the most muscular. I think that's his bread and butter pose. That's what he's known for. He's called the mutant. The most muscular is really about who is the most eye-grabbing, attention-getting, most muscular bodybuilder. Who is the biggest freak? And I think at the end of the day, if Nick brought comparable conditioning to what he brought last year, that would hold true for him this year. So most muscular, I think you got to give that to Nick Walker. I think that's his shot. From head to toe, everything looks crazy on him in this pose. Arms, shoulders, abs, chest, legs. I think he looks crazier than both Brandon and Bonac in this shot. And they show both the hands clasped and the crab pose most muscular. I think that Nick looks better in the hands clasped pose, but I think he still looks freakier than both of them, even when you look at the crab version of the pose. So let me know, as we're going, let me know in the comment section below if you agree with what I'm saying here. If you disagree, what poses would you give to Nick, or what poses would you not give to Nick? But both most muscular variations, I would say Nick would take those two poses. Now, the side chest pose, I really like Bonac in this shot. Nick hits it really well. Brandon hits it pretty decent. But Bonac, to me, has a really crazy side chest. And the reason why I say that is not just the upper body. I really like the separation that you can see in his legs in this pose. The glute hamstring tie-in, that separation between the quads and the hams. I think he just looks really impressive in this pose. And for me, just looking at this picture of Nick in that lineup, I really like Bonac the best in that pose. So let's go. Nick takes most muscular. We'll just go give Bonac the side chest for the sake of the argument here. So 1-to-1, Nick and Bonac. And again, there's a lot more factors that go into scoring than just the mandatory poses. There's the quarter turns you got to take into consideration, proportion, symmetry, conditioning. These all factor in, but this is just a subjective look at the poses. So front lat spread. Honestly, I've said this before, I think this is kind of the weak point for Nick Walker, just because of his structure here. It might not be something he can fix. Maybe it is, depending on the way he hits the pose. But if you're looking at structure, which I think, to me, is what draws my eye in the front lat spread pose, I would take Brandon Curry. Because what I'm looking at in the front lat spread is whose lats and whose V-taper is the most visible and the most pronounced in this pose. And my eyes in this pose are drawn to Brandon Curry. I really like how Brandon hits this shot. And for that reason, I prefer Curry in the front lat spread to both Nick and Bonac. Nick and Bonac, they've got a little bit of a blockier physique that just doesn't really lend itself as much to this pose. And I think Curry stands out to me in the front lat spread. So I'll give Curry that one. So now everybody has a pose right now. Back double bicep. To be honest, I think you got to give this pose to William Bonac. William Bonac has one of the best backs in the IFBB. It's one of the most densely, thickly muscled backs that I think we have on any pro stage right now. And the reason why I would give it to Bonac is because I think his conditioning was on point. So when you have a back that thick and that dense, but you can see that much detail, and look at the separation in the glutes and hamstrings. Even though Nick does have a pretty good, his conditioning at the arm was pretty good, and you can see a lot of detail from the back with him too. But I think if you look at the whole pose, the upper back, that mid to lower lat area on Bonac, I think is a lot thicker than Nick's. Brandon has a crazy back too, but I think the lower body, the glutes and hamstrings, kind of takes away from it for me. So I would give this pose to Bonac. So now Bonac has 2 poses. Nick and Curry both have 1. Now let's go into the front double bicep here. Honestly, this is a tough one because this is a really subjective situation because each of these guys looks so different in the front double bicep. Nick has a really freaky looking front double bicep, and from head to toe, he looks pretty insane. But if you're talking about structure, which is also factored into the judging, I personally prefer Brandon Curry's front double bicep. Even though he's a little bit off here, I think Brandon has one of the most pleasant to look at front double biceps in bodybuilding right now. His V-taper, everything that goes into this pose, the shape of the biceps themselves, his V-taper, his lats from the front, his small waist, I think it's a very, very just overall just pleasant pose for Brandon. And subjectively speaking, I would give this pose to Brandon. I'm sure a lot of you guys would disagree with me on that and go with Nick Walker just for the freakier biceps. But I think the overall appeal of the pose, I really prefer Brandon in this shot. Now I've got 2 poses for Curry, 2 poses for Bonac, and 1 pose for Nick. Now let's go into the abs and thighs here. This pose I would give to Nick Walker. Nick Walker, I think, one of the things that I like about Nick is that a lot of the criticism that he got is with the midsection. But in a pose like this, where the midsection is actually heavily judged, it is called the abs and thighs, you can't argue with the separation and really just the pronounced thickness that he has in his abdominal muscles. He looks really crazy in this pose. His quads look crazy, a lot of detail from the front. He turned his midsection into one of his stronger poses because he does have such deep and defined abs. So now everybody has 2 poses. Let's go to the back lat spread. Back lat spread, I would say the same thing as the back double bicep. William Bonac is just very, very complete from the back. I would have to give that pose to Bonac just like I would give him the back double bicep. I don't see either Nick or Curry beating his back shots at this show with the conditioning that Bonac had here. So now we got 3 for Bonac, 2 for Nick, 2 for Curry. Side tricep. I think this is another tough one. I would go ahead and give that pose to Nick just because looking at this picture, I mean, if we're being honest, whose physique are we drawn to the most in this picture? And one of the things that Nick is obviously known for is really insane arms and shoulders, and I think he shows those off very well here. His legs look insane here. His calves look insane here. I think this is a very complete pose for Nick. And again, just subjectively speaking, whose eyes are you drawn to the most in this pose? I mean, both Brandon and Bonac have pretty decent side triceps here. But again, it's just not the same Brandon that we saw at the Olympia, and we've got a better version of Bonac than we saw at the Olympia. So I don't know. I think it would be close. So I believe that is all 8 of the mandatory poses. And again, shout out to Superset Man for editing these together. You can follow him on Instagram at the Superset Man. So we got Bonac and Nick with 3 each, and Curry with 2. So Nick took 3 of those poses away from Brandon or Bonac. And some of them I think were debatable. And again, you guys can let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. But I think to answer the question, would Nick have won in this lineup? Could Nick have defended his title? I think there's a very high probability that Nick Walker would have won. I think there's a very high probability. Actually, I think it's almost impossible that he wouldn't have been in the top 2 here. But, you know, again, there's honestly no way of knowing for sure how Nick would have done here. He could have been off. He might not have looked how he looked at the Olympia or at the Arnold Classic. He is with a different coach now. So there's a whole lot of subjective factors that go into this. And just looking at it pose for pose, just strictly speculative, opinion-based. And again, no disrespect to any of these guys. But to answer the question, I do think Nick would have had a very strong shot at defending his title here. And I think it would have been awesome to see. Again, it wasn't Nick's choice. I think he wanted to compete here. I think he was probably planning on competing here initially. But he did say in those stories that we saw earlier that we're going to see him back at the 2023 Arnold Classic. The next time, however, we're going to see him on stage will be the Olympia. So we will get to see how this plays out on the Olympia stage between him, Curry, and Bonac. And then after that, we're going to see him defend his title at the Arnold Classic in 2023. And hopefully we see both Brandon and Bonac at that Arnold Classic, because both of them are Arnold Classic champions as well. To have 3 Arnold Classic champions in the same lineup, I think would be pretty damn entertaining. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet already. Hit that thumbs up button. Let me know if you disagree with me. Let me know if you agree. As always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.